Hello, this is Elliot Middleton, and I want to tell you about some great solutions we have for customer problems with the way we can deploy Wonderware Historian. First scenario I want to talk about is Geo-SCADA, where the applications are geographically distributed. It happens often in water, power transmission, and oil and gas pipelines, for example. Also, oil and gas production. So let's take the example where I have several sites that are distributed geographically. I have needs at those sites for information. On those sites, I need pretty high fidelity data, but relatively short term. But I also have a need for central reporting and administration and to be the long-term system of record to consolidate information from all of those sites. It's often common that we have pretty volatile wide area network connections from these sites. They may be over a cellular modem or a satellite link. We have some applications where these are offshore platforms, so very flaky from a network perspective. Those make for additional challenges. Some questions to ask customers in these kind of scenarios, and I won't read all of these to you, but do refer to them. Things like, what kind of challenges do you have in consolidating reporting across all of these sites? Ask about their network infrastructure and what challenges they have there around security. And that may be kind of traditional cybersecurity kind of concerns like firewalls and so forth. Or it might also include things like each site is in a different Active Directory domain than the central site. All of those are things to take into consideration in proposing a solution. Also ask them about their ability to do diagnostics and troubleshooting. So if you look at a traditional historian solution, whether it's a Wonderware historian or other competing historians, kind of the traditional way to do this is have distributed sites that are all sending data to a central historian. And that puts in kind of an extra strain on this wide area network. So I'm sending all of the data that I need for detailed troubleshooting diagnostics up to the central site. And then I'm also consuming bandwidth, bringing it back to show on a trend or other type of display here at the site. What I need at the central site is relatively low fidelity, long-term data, but what I need at the remote site is relatively short-term, high-fidelity data. With distributed historians and our historian replication capability in Wonderware Historian, we really have the best of both worlds. So locally, I can keep that high-fidelity data and only send up the summary data that's needed at the central facility. And I don't need to bring that detailed data back over this wide area network where I have limited bandwidth and typically pretty volatile connections. So I make the best use of the local network here at the site and the wide area network to send data to the central system. When you talk to people about this, you may get some objections, and they'll be things like, we can't afford to have another historian at every site. And we do have a great solution for that in this local edition of Wonderware Historian. It's a very cost-effective. We have it in a 25,000 tag system and a 50,000 tag system, and they're very inexpensive. The only real limitation is you can only query the last 7 days of history from these systems. If that's a big barrier, then you can use a standard historian here. If it's a really small system, we also have a 32 tag historian that's free. So for really small applications, you can use that. If there are objections around the network security, we really have a great solution here. We only require a single outbound TCP port from the site to the central system. These can be in different Active Directory domains that have no trust relationship between them even. And it'll work very simply. We also have a very solid solution when it comes to dealing with network hiccups. We have one customer who's running over a cellular modem and they have 30,000 disconnects a day. That's roughly every 3 seconds. And we're able to sustain that connection and send good, reliable, available data. When you're looking at these distributed applications, there are a few part numbers or product details that you need to keep in mind. So on these central sites, you need to use a Wonderware Enterprise Edition historian. The Enterprise Edition is required to receive data from a remote historian. Keep in mind that many of the system platform parts include an Enterprise Edition. So if you're applying a system platform at the remote site and it includes an Enterprise Edition, you don't need it there, but you can repurpose that historian license and put it at the central facility. And then backfill with a local edition or an express or even a standard edition historian. Keep in mind that the local edition is a lot more cost effective if you can get by with the limitations there. We have done a lot of things to support this type of application in recent releases. Most recently in the 2014 R2 release, we made the network bandwidth much more efficient. We are going to be adding alarm and event replication and adding support for replicating to Wonderware Online. I'll say more about that in a little bit. So even more enhancements coming in this area for this type of application. One thing that's a common question in exploring these kinds of scenarios is, what bandwidth do I need for a given application? So we actually have a spreadsheet that's posted on the tech support website that's there for you to estimate what the bandwidth requirements will be. The basic idea is you fill in a few parameters about what your data rates are, tag counts, and then you get results about what the storage requirements and the network requirements are for that scenario. Next scenario. A lot of customers are trying to balance this need for information in the business network, but without compromising the security of the control network. So the business needs are really around reporting. So business level users need access to that information, but they don't want to put the control systems in jeopardy from cybersecurity attacks. A lot of concern over network security, obviously, within customers. Some questions to ask. Again, what kind of challenges are you facing in this area? How concerned are you about network security? Another one that we haven't really talked much about, I think, with customers is around backups. So it's real common in the business network environment to have good, reliable backup procedures and automated systems for doing that. However, those are often lacking in the control network. So if your historian is on the control network, how is that getting backed up? How are you ensuring that you have reliable storage of that very valuable detailed process history? So there's several approaches for addressing this in the past. So kind of the traditional approach has been put your historian on the control network and open up the firewall to business network users to be able to access it. The big problem with that is really around the level of exposure you've given the control system to outside attack. Another approach is to put historians on both networks. I can put a local edition historian, or it can be another one here on the control network, and replicate data to the business network historian. On a local area network, we typically see a second or so latency. So you have very accurate, timely information available on the business network, but all you have to do is open up this outbound connection from the business network, from the control network to the business network. There are no ports that have to be open the other direction. So you have a sort of software data diode. Again, the same part numbers. The business network historian has to be an enterprise edition. As before, you can repurpose a system platform historian that was embedded in that. If it's an enterprise edition, put that on the business network, backfill with the local edition. Again, some of the same objections are common around the cost of that, but we have a great solution in the local edition historian. Things about, or concerns about network security. I've got a firewall between the business and the control networks, and I don't want to open that up. The main concern about opening a firewall is opening inbound connections to the control network, and we do not need that. Other historians do require that, but we don't. Ours is only an outbound connection from the control network. It's a single port, very limited exposure from a security standpoint. The latency, as I said, is very low, so that should not be an obstacle. And again, the cost considerations. So we have great answers to all of those. Some of the things that we've done recently also address needs in this application. Things about alarm and event support are coming for that tier 2 historian on the business network. Again, being able to push data to Wonderware Online as another option of hosting a second historian on premise. It's real simple to set up replication from the control network historian to the business network. We have a simple SQL script that will do that automatically as you add new tags, for example, that automatically get pushed to the business network. Another scenario, many customers are really concerned about having access to historian data, regardless of network and system failure kind of scenarios. So the business needs are really about the need for reporting, being able to report on these systems and preserving that in a reliable fashion. You can ask questions like, what are the consequences of not being able to report on operations? A common one would be not being able to release product until we can create those detailed reports about the actual manufacturing performance. If the concern is mostly about retention and being able to have the data, there may be simpler solutions such as reliable disk, but for always being able to report on it, you really need reliable historians, and reliable in the sense that they're immune to system and network failures. So traditional solutions here have been very expensive in terms of a hardware cost or the infrastructure requirements. So in the past, we've made recommendations to have clustered virtual servers, and those work, but you really do need a lot of infrastructure to support a virtual cluster, a virtual machine cluster. With our redundant historian solution, we can use conventional workstation hardware very cost effectively and really deliver a low-cost solution that gives you the availability that people need. You can combine it with virtualization even, but typically that's overkill. We give a discount for the redundant pair historian. It's a significant discount so that you can save money on that second one. And again, we don't require any special hardware. Keep in mind that this redundancy solution protects you not only from hardware failures, like I lost a motherboard or a hard drive, but it also protects you from things like Windows updates. So if I have to apply a Windows update and reboot the server, the redundant partner can continue running, and clients will hit that even through the update on the primary. Then the secondary one can be patched once the primary is back online. Our approach here is an active form of redundancy. So both historians are always reliably collecting data. We'll automatically switch the historian client over on a fault. You can combine this with system platforms, redundant engines. So the way this works is the active-passive redundancy in the engines will automatically historize to both historians. All of this includes redundancy for alarm and event history, regardless of whether they're using the database or the block-based alarm and event history. If you're using traditional InTouch, not application server, and only using SweetLink as your source, you can configure redundant historians here. We don't give you tools to make that particularly simple to keep them in sync, but as long as you keep two historians in sync in terms of their configuration, we'll historize data to both. The same data, the same tags, and all the client-side failover functionality will work just as it does with application server. In this configuration, you're also eligible for the discounted price on the redundant historian. We've added the redundant alarm and event history support. That was in the Historian 2014, and we're continuing to improve upon that. Another scenario. There are a lot of customers who have HMI-only applications, and they just have no visibility of what's going on outside of the operating environment. What we're looking for is a way to make that information available for analysis, reporting, and troubleshooting. So here's the typical scenario. A small facility. In this particular example, we're looking at a water treatment plant. That's the entire plant. It all fits in a shipping container. Obviously, in this type of scenario, you don't have a big IT department or a lot of staff to deal with maintaining systems. So it has to be really, really simple. We see this as a good fit for a lot of resellers. They may be OEMs embedding an HMI in their solution. Maybe it's the shipping container water treatment plant. Or maybe it's more of a targeted solution in a particular application domain. Coal seam gas is one that we've talked about with customers. A lot of water purification applications as well. Irrigation systems. All of these are great fits for a really super simple solution, and we have it. So look for, in larger customers, opportunities that are in smaller facilities. We have one customer, it's an agricultural chemical customer. They use all Wonderware products in their main North American facilities. When we first talked to them about this solution, they said, we're not interested. We have all of our stuff on premise and are happy with it. But as we talked more about the opportunities, they realized there are a lot of small facilities, in their case, farms that have only a few tags. I think these are where they test their chemicals. Today, that information is completely lost and isolated. They don't have any visibility to it. But if they could do it really simply, they're very keen to collect that information. And so this is a perfect solution for them. Talk to a food and beverage customer. And in this case, again, large global company. They're using our products on premise for all of their large North American facilities. But they have much smaller facilities in emerging economies where they just don't have the infrastructure in staff and hardware and systems to be able to support a full-blown historian. But if it's simple to put in, they're really keen to collect that data and be able to use it for analysis and reporting. So some of the common objections are really around infrastructure requirements and capacity. That may be hardware, but it's more likely around people. They just don't have the bandwidth to deal with it, adding yet another system to maintain. So it has to be super simple. They may tell you that we don't give sites access to the internet. Typically, there is some way to get the internet as long as you have very constrained requirements. And we do. There are only a few websites that you have to be able to hit, and we can give you that list. It's all secured access. None of the access has to be coming back into the site. It's all outbound from the site to our very targeted Wonderware Online solution. We have very reliable wide area network support using the same infrastructure that we have talked about already for the on-premise solutions based on historian replication, using the same core technology there. The basic scenario is a very small HMI-only application. We have a small bit of software that we install there that we call the Historian Publisher. Conceptually, this is similar to remote IDaaS, but it is a different technology. It provides all the infrastructure, communications, the security, store forward there at the site. nothing to maintain, no elevated rights on the system. Very simple and secure. We have an outbound connection only, can work across the firewall. It's an encrypted channel to Wonderware Online. We can access this data in all the modern browsers. And we also have support for it from Historian Client Trend for a thick client interface and for smart clients for mobile device access. The data centers that we use, or we're actually leveraging the Microsoft data centers, and they have very rigorous physical security requirements and have met all kinds of certifications there. This is ideal for applications where they just can't afford the upfront capital cost of deploying another solution, but they are open to making it an operating expense. We're expanding the sources that we support. We do support Historian SDK applications. VGO SciTech is coming. Endosoft support is coming, as well as Geo-SCADA support. We've recently released support for several new source systems. Over the last year, we've had many updates, both to the online capabilities, particularly in the browser, as well as the breadth of sources that we support. On the roadmap, we're continuing to expand the capabilities we have within the browser and continuing to reach into smaller and smaller applications with targeting IoT kinds of applications. We'll be adding alarm and event support and integrating this into the DevStudio Online environment as well. If you're interested in this scenario in particular, look for a separate presentation where I talk in more detail about what we're doing with Wonderware Online. So, brief review of all the historian topologies. They're the simple traditional ones where I just have a single historian, might be on the same computer as the actual device interfaces. Next, redundant historians. So here I can send data to two historians. It's highly available. Didn't really talk much about remote IDaaS, but we do have a option to put just a data collector on a system and send reliable data to a remote historian. This is great when you don't have a need for local access to the data at the remote site. When you do need that local access, a historian local edition is a far better solution. So I have that local high fidelity access as well as essential reporting support. Historian Online Edition is our first hosted historian offering from 2013. It's the same bits that you can install on premise, but we delivered it as a service. It's a tier 2 historian for consolidating data from lots of different sites. Going forward, the emphasis is really more on Wonderware Online, which today is a tier 1 historian for small applications. By the end of 2015, it'll also be a tier 2 for much larger applications. And really targeting these scenarios where you don't have the infrastructure in place. That gives you a good overview of the different topologies that we can support with Wonderware Historian and the customer problems that they address.